Have you ever wondered what the key ingredient is to great sex, great love, great relationships, great dating, and so many other things in one's life? So we're going to discuss that today. What is the key to a lot that you've been wanting in internal family systems? We call it the self, and we're going to describe what that is. So my name is Percy Ballard.
I'm Emily Liu. Welcome to our channel. So let's get right into what the self is.
Yes, great. So
I'm going to describe it as in a simple way that I think many people can probably relate to, and that is when you see a baby. Maybe it's your own baby that you've had, maybe it's a relative's baby that you've had, and you see how everybody's always like cooing down to the baby, and they're so connected and curious, and they're playful and they're present. So that is an embodiment of the self. You feel good, you're having good energy exchange with that person. Another example is a pet. Those people who own pets, they love their pets. It's unconditional love between the two of them. And when you feel that unconditional love towards your pet, that is your highest self.
Right.
And the self is, and we'll go over these, and Percy and I will go into the qualities of the self in detail.
Yeah, so there are people or pets can bring out this highest quality of ourself in us, our best self, one might call it. This is in spiritual terms, I guess you can describe it in spiritual, biological terms, you can describe it in psychological terms. But a lot of people, with spirituality, they might call it their source, their spiritual source. They might call it their higher self. They might call it their essence. They might call it their Buddha nature, or their Christ consciousness,
or the divine, or the soul, or the inner wisdom.
Right, the inner higher power.
Whatever resonates with you. And this is in all of us. We were born with this. And what happens is that when we end up experiencing negative things in our childhood, and when people start to say no to us, the self starts to get checked out. Because when the self is curious and confident and courageous, you're singing in front of the relatives when you were 7 years old, and the mom says, no, girls are to be seen, not heard. Shut up. So your creative part, your artistic part got dampened, and you're like, okay, how do I need to show up? So your highest self, that's courageous and confident, sometimes that goes out the window. And that those protective layers are also what shows up during dating, sex, and love.
Right. So when you ask people, when do they most feel their authentic self, when they feel the most authentically themselves? And if you ask them, what are they like when they're authentically themselves, when they really feel like they're in their flow, in their zone, they'll describe a number of characteristics, and there are patterns to what these characteristics are. So in IFS, it's named a lot of them, 13 qualities that are there, 8 C's and 5 P's. So to start out, one might be curious, connected, clear, compassionate. They care about the other people around them. They're calm. They're not afraid. They're very courageous. They're creative. They have access to all of their creative potential, and they're confident, which is very attractive. And you want to go through the piece?
Yes. So think about the moments when you've been present with someone, you're patient, you're playful, like with a baby, persistent, and you have perspective. So imagine showing up like this during the honeymoon phase of great partnerships that you've had. Honeymoon phase, maybe the dating phase, where nothing can go wrong and everyone is in their best self and you're just being playful with one another. Those are our highest selves interacting with each other, and that's the self-to-self connection. And this is the model that's that's described through the lens of internal family systems, which is a psychospiritual model of self-leadership. And this is what's needed to get everything you want in your life, including great sex, great love, great relationships. This is the foundation. So you got to access who you are. The reason why you sometimes cannot access who you are is because of some of the little and big traumas that you've experienced, so significant emotional events during your childhood that has you all guarded up. And you get guarded up in dating because you're like, okay, I have to make sure I don't share that. I have to make sure I look a certain way. And
You're putting the mask on, so your real self is not showing through. And we feel like we need to do this because we need to be protected from something, because bad stuff has happened to us when we aren't guarded. But as you know, we might all find out, bad stuff also happens when we are guarded, and sometimes it happens even more when we are guarded, when we aren't coming from this authentic self of curiosity and strength and courage and vulnerability.
yes.
So, Emily, you've described one way of self-leadership, to think about self-leadership, is courageous vulnerability.
Yes.
And I really do like that because I think it captures both sides of what we're talking about. So you can think of it as a yin side and a yang side of self-leadership.
So you were saying that the yin side is the vulnerability part, and the courageous is the yang side, more the masculine side, and the vulnerability, sharing other feelings, is the feminine side. So it's really coming to wholeness.
Right, and very, very, very much worth saying. There are feminine, expressions of courage as well, and masculine expressions of vulnerability, which I don't think we honor enough in our society. Yet, what we're talking about are, a yin and a yang, two sides. We're not talking about being weak and being a pushover. It also involves courage, and we're not talking about, being dominant and, suppressing other people, or, tossing aside every part and everyone else who's weak. No, we're also talking about vulnerability, being willing to be on the same level with someone else, and courageously. And that is very, very attractive and compelling in another individual wherever it shows up. In the boardroom, on a date, in the office, you name it. But when people see that, they take note. It does get people's attention. And so that's what we want to help with.
Yes, and that courageous vulnerability is what you need to bring into dating, sex, and love. Because when you are real, think about the people that you know who are authentic and real. What is it about them that has you describing them as authentic and real? I think it's more than likely that they are not afraid to share what they're feeling. They're not judging others. I mean, if they're going to judge, they'll judge themselves and make fun of themselves. And that again is really, if you think of the self as that Buddha nature, it's that one step higher. It's zoom out. Have the self look down into who you are. The parts, your parts, the little inner roommates that you have in your head, the voices that are running your life. And that's why it's so important to understand what self-leadership is. And if you want to go deeper, we'll provide the links to the self-leadership website, and there's plenty of books that you could start to read about self-leadership. Because in order to fully embody and become courageously vulnerable, you do have to understand the science behind this psychospiritual model of showing up as your authentic self. And when you get access to that self and you do the healing that needs to be done, that is when you could step into dating, sex, and love from such a different place. And that is also when you can attract people who are also on that personal growth mode, who are more authentic and real, instead of repeating the same bad patterns over and over again.
So yeah, one could describe the self from in scientific and biological terms I think for this video, I think we just want to help people understand what the experience of being in self is like, to see where they can relate to that, because it's really the experience of it that's important, although one can understand it from a different, more, objective perspective. But we want to get you into the subjective right now.
Yes, so just think about your best moments where you just felt like, whoa, I was just on fire. I felt so good about myself. Or that baby, it's just like so present, and I'm so in love with my dog, my cat. They can do no wrong.
Yeah, so when do you most feel in self?
When, I think when I'm in my higher self on most days, when I'm having a difficult time and stress with somebody I had a conflict with or a bad conversation with, and it's unresolved, that gets my parts all stirred
That gets
up.
your parts up, right?
Yeah.
So you're not in self in that moment.
No, and we're gonna make a video about how I overcame that through being courageously vulnerable.
Sure. So when in your day do you most feel in self?
You mean during that?
When are you most embodying self?
Embodying self.
Yeah.
When I'm in conversations with other people.
So connection.
I mean, I thrive on connecting. I could sit in front of the computer all day, but it's through conversations like this that really gives me the energy to, I feel supported. I feel connected. I'm not alone. And it's not just surface conversations. I mean, it could be conversations over text with a good friend where we're going a little bit deeper, and she hears me and sees me and supports me when I'm in a down place, and I think that gets me back into self.
Yeah, so a really deep, authentic connection can bring out self in you.
And what about you?
Yeah, for me, a number of things. The deep, authentic connection definitely does it 100%. For me, sometimes I need to go inside to feel that. So I might meditate and really connect with who I am, connect with my source. So I have a meditation practice that helps me get into a grounded state and be ready to have authentic connections. And that is, kind of there are people who have, introverted tendencies and will need to be alone in order to get into self, and will need to do something internal. Other people, they get into self, they get into their highest self by connecting with other people. And I feel like all people can ultimately do both. One can be in self when they're alone, one can be in self when they are with other people.
Yes.
Another example, I think, just when a friend of mine had a child, and I went to connect with this child, and just to meet them, and we had to, walk to a different restaurant. So I just carried this baby the whole way, and I'm feeling, oh my gosh, there is serious, it'll sound nerdy, but there's serious oxytocin flowing here.
Yes.
There is a real sense of, there's this being here that if anyone were to mess with this baby, I would just them up.
Let me just add, there's lots of oxytocin released after orgasm. Just in case you're wondering, okay, well,
what is oxytocin? Oxytocin is
cuddle hormone.
It's the hormone of connection. So it's the sense of connection and warmth with this child that just really got the feeling of self going in me. So that happens a lot in connection with other people. And also there are exercises to get that going on my own as well.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that some of my friends who are on these dating apps, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting nervous on this date, and they have all these stories built up with this person that they read in a profile, and they haven't even met them yet, and they build a story. It's like, well, how about not build the story and just get curious? This is not a date. This is just, think of it going to a networking meeting.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to connect with other people, and we want to have self-to-self connection. We want to bring people into a mode where they can be their authentic selves and help other people to be in their authentic selves, so they can have the self-to-self connection and bring that out into the world, because it does beautiful things.
Yes.
So let's see, we've got 15 minutes here, so we're at 15 minutes. So let's just conclude what we're taking from this, and then we will see you in part 2, where I believe we will discuss what is self to self. What is it like when a self connects with another self?
So essentially, the self is the key to extraordinary sex and love. And the self allows you to be courageously vulnerable, to speak for all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And that courageous vulnerability is what creates deep connection and intimacy. And ultimately, that's what we're all looking for, because that's what makes us feel good, feel alive, and feel happy.
Wow.
So we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Couldn't have put it better myself. Beautiful.